Hey guys, Matt. I'm going to read in a moment chapter 31, which is just continuing the reality anomalies from the PowerPoint presentation before. What are the chances this could happen? How is this possible? My list goes on and on and on. I probably got to half of it. I wish I could do a PowerPoint presentation, make it exciting, videos, images. I can't do that. The last video I put up on the commercial after the JFK announcement, it says on my video manager, blocked in some countries. So I need to remove that. I'm not going to leave a video up that is not a chapter. This YouTube channel primarily is about the chapters of the book. If I put in, I'll put in what I can in my observations around the chapters, but if something's blocked, I don't want that to create a negative profile. Like my profile is probably already negative enough from YouTube or Google's perspective. So I'm going to have to delete that very soon. And the chapters will remain. Some of the other videos, especially if I use any images, will not remain. They're just sidebar, tertiary discussions, not paramount to the book. Also, before we deal in negative subjects, I'm going to practice what I preach. Here's my user warning as it stands now, a short introduction. I understand this video asks you to focus on negative subjects. We now understand that this is exactly what they want us doing our entire lives. They want us to continue this. Once we see the fraud someday, all of us must end our chasing of rabbit holes. Please understand, though, I see my role as someone who is skilled at revealing the massive fraud, the fraud being presented on all of us. So I'm going to stay engaged at this level longer than you should to help those that are new. But please take my advice. Use this information to see the life trick, but don't get stuck at this level. When you fully see it and comprehend society's trick, move on from the endless conspiracy rabbit holes. Improve yourself. Shine your light. However, I hope you don't leave too soon, because the message of this book, I promise, will turn positive. I'm going to deliver that message from time to time. It's an important reminder so we don't get stuck. And because I'm sure there's a few people that get confused with what they might see as a conflicting message. Look, I'm going to continue to refine my theories about how we've done exactly what the system wants us to do. We've analyzed, we've focused on the negative elements, the fraud, the hell, and then we've, like my last video said, we are mutants who can see, but then we just use our skills to recruit other mutants. So they sit back and watch and are very pleased with what people like Matt are doing. This type of video doesn't go against that. My process, I believe, still remains the same. You need to be able to see the fraud first. For anybody new coming into this, the book's tactic is to present the first half. It's overwhelming evidence that life isn't what it seems. Overwhelming evidence that there's a life trick going on. So I'm still in the book. I'm still in that overwhelming evidence, and it's endless. It's chapter after chapter after chapter. That is just the theory of how I figured I needed to do this. And it's interesting, I know, still to most of you what I'm about to present, but if it's just too much negativity, come back here in maybe 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, when we're getting into the positive side. They don't plan on us coming out of this. See, that's the thing. They want us stuck here forever in the revolving turnstile. What they haven't planned on is us leaving it behind and moving out of it. But I might never be able to leave it behind, because my role is helping the new person. Chapter 31, The Endless Reality Anomalies, continued. Let's start off with a fun one. What are the chances that a basketball player named Magic Johnson, that means magic penis, would become the second most promiscuous basketball player of all time, and because of that, ended up getting AIDS? Then, what are the chances his arch rival would also be called a slang word for penis? Bird. If AIDS has been a death sentence for tens of millions since 1985, why has Magic shown no signs of illness in over 30 years? I don't know exactly what's going on here, but we'll watch it closely for the future. By the way, the most promiscuous basketball player of all time is Wilt Chamberlain. What are the chances regarding the 2014 Ebola scare in the United States? The first 5 patients, with some actually flown back to the United States, were all 33 years old. 33, of course, the most important number in Freemasonry. Shows up yet again. Why would the first rule of medicine regarding isolation and quarantine be broken by bringing the virus to the United States by flying patients here? Dr. Kent Brantley, Ebola victim, 33 years old. Dr. Craig Spencer, 33. Nurse Kaki Hickox, 33. Eshko Mukpo, 33. Thomas Duncan, 33. What are you saying, Mr. Author, that the disease wasn't real? Really? Yeah. Now, Ebola may exist, but what happened back in 2014 with flying these patients back to the U.S., that was not real. Okay, at what point would any American to begin to question anything? It gets ridiculous at some point. What if the first 5 patients' names related to a cartoon character? Would you believe that? When do you question what you're being told? What if Daffy Donaldson was flown to Jefferson Hospital because of Ebola, then Bugs Barton was flown to MD Anderson, Popeye Jones, the husband of an olive tycoon, was taken to Mass General, and Jerry Toms was rushed to Johns Hopkins? At what point along the ridiculous reality scale will people question their friggin' reality? I'm going away from the book for a moment, but that scene in Trading Places, I mean, what are the chances? It's incredible. We've all, the old guard has seen it. They're about to go in to do the trading in the World Trade Center. The cab pulls up. Pause it sometime. Look at the cab. The cab is cab number 110, 110 stories in the World Trade Center. Both fares code, so much fare for the first 10 minutes, then so many fares per mile thereafter. Both are clearly 9/11s. Then Dan Aykroyd gives the famous speech about the carnage. Eddie Murphy, or was it Valentine, I guess his name was, the carnage you're about to witness is unprecedented, right as they walk in front of the World Trade Center. In the second part, I think I was the first one to notice this. When they're in 30th Street Station, Jamie Lee Curtis takes her gum out, kisses them goodbye, they give them the money, hope they don't lose the money. They go down track 9, they turn around, Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, to look back at Jamie Lee Curtis going down the escalator. It's track 9, clearly, but it's actually Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy as they turn around going down the escalator that form the 11. They form the 11 with their bodies. Track 9 is above, absolutely on purpose. What are the chances that a human being is like the only living thing on the planet that gets a sunburn? It must protect itself from the sun when all other plants or even insects, some small insects do, and they hide in the grass. But most things don't have to. How's that? How is that? Darwin? Did cowboys need to lather up their horses with Coppertone before heading out west? A repeated frying of the sunburn can kill a human being. I'd like to ask Charles Darwin why millions of years of evolution couldn't solve that small problem, which should be the most basic issue that could ever present itself to a species: how to survive under a sun that we can't escape. If the script zombie right now is dying to tell me, well, we had protection, Matt, at some point, we had hair. Well, really? If the sun can kill, then why did we lose the hair then? If we lost the hair hundreds of thousands of years ago, why didn't the skin then, Darwin, adapt to the sun at the same rate as the hair loss? The skin can produce callus on the hand and foot in just about a week. Forget the sun. Why would the human body continue to think that hair is not necessary in all the cold climates? Why would the human body conclude that hair is not necessary in Africa when the skin starts burning from the sun in just 45 minutes? Would a hairy African get too hot? The lions, cheetahs, hyenas, and all the other animals don't mind all the hair. And if it would be needed to save someone's life from sunburn, then we would have kept the hair. I mean, wouldn't Darwin say the man or woman who had sunburn resistance, whether it be from hair or from anything else, would have a reproduction advantage in natural selection? Don't tell me about black people's pigmentation. Black people burn. White people in Europe were still outside farming all day long about 6 months of the year. If anything Darwin says was real, our skin, all of our skins, would not burn today. Period. We had a few 100 million years to adapt to the sun, didn't we, Darwin? If skin can produce callus from just friction walking on shells on your beach vacation in about a week, why can't the skin learn to protect us from the sun in about 2 or 3 or 5 million years? If you think big enough, there are multiple possibilities that will never appear on CNN. One is perhaps the sun didn't burn us in the past. Perhaps it changed at some point in recent history. Who knows? Maybe we were not originally intended for this realm. Perhaps our DNA has changed. There's a million different possibilities. The script zombies, though, I'm saying, will just laugh at me for any kind of crazy suggestions and run right back to their master, Darwin. What are the chances there are only 3 autonomous city-states in this world, and each one just happens to be responsible for one of the 3 legs of the stool you sit on, or poop stool, supporting the global control structure? This means there are 3 cities inside of countries who are sovereign countries in and of themselves and don't answer to the country that surrounds them in any way. The 3-legged stool of control of this world, of course, is military, religion, and money. The 3 city-states are, of course, the Vatican, Washington, D.C., and the City of London. As mentioned, it's not London, it's the autonomous city-state inside called the City of London. The Vatican controls religion, of course. Washington, D.C., not officially part of the United States, is the world's army. The City of London is the conduit upon which all global money flows. Now, the master demons who right now control this world, they must show all of us what they're doing and hide it in plain sight. They must openly create untouchable city-states inside the proletariat system itself. They create Mount Olympus on the map for all to see, put themselves then on top of it, and scream down at all of us, "All is well, you poor devils! If you work hard enough, any of you fools can become president up here." President of the servants, people that bring us drinks and coffee, perhaps. That was the role of Obama, to cement the lie that any of us peasants can make it all the way from the slums of Jakarta to the White House, by way of Kenya and a communist father figure. The Obama sock puppet story showed all of us that even if your mother posed naked for the biggest Marxist in Hawaii, and you're partially raised by that pervert, had multiple names, and have a complete story in history that doesn't make any sense, you can overcome all of it and become President of the United States. How is it possible that back in the 80s, in a rush to get a computer to market, IBM essentially gave away the operating system to be used for the next 30 years in all PCs worldwide to Microsoft, and basically gave away an outsourced chip architecture to Intel? If IBM would have just been patient and taken an extra 6 to 12 months maybe, they could be 3 times the size that they are today. Imagine IBM plus Microsoft plus Intel as one company. That's the story they tell us. Do I buy it? Of course not. Okay, here's the BS story that we're all told via this legend and lure from Silicon Valley. IBM was more concerned with PC hardware, and when Microsoft, a company of about 10 employees, said they could deliver to IBM an operating system in time to meet their product rollout schedule, IBM agreed. Both little old Microsoft and little old tiny Intel then grew up to be bigger than IBM itself in, say, stock market cap. In fact, Microsoft took or stole most of the ideas for the DOS operating system from another tiny company. They paid $50,000 to this company. $50,000 for something that would go on to be worth tens of billions. Why was it so important for IBM, the largest computer company in the world, to give up control over a $100 billion future to compete with little old Apple in the personal computer market for hardware? They were just so rushed that they had to outsource the DOS operating system and 386 architecture to other companies. IBM had been in business for over 50 years at the time. They were the world's number 1 in computers. Apple had just come out of Steve's garage, right? 2 guys just in a garage drinking beer. They're going to take down all of IBM. If IBM would have just taken 6 additional months to figure out the operating system for themselves, you could tack on about $500 billion onto their present day market cap. The story is the largest computer company in the world, who supplied logistic machines to Hitler, was just so terrified that these two kids, they just are coming out of the garage, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, and IBM, with thousands of the greatest minds in the computer world and contacts all over the world, couldn't figure out a rudimentary DOS operating system that tiny companies in Seattle were working on. Is that the flashing green cursor? Is it really that flashing green light we remember from the late 80s? Is that so sophisticated that it escaped the greatest minds at IBM? What if Dr. J said he couldn't run a basketball camp? Would you believe it? What if Eddie Van Halen had to outsource guitar lessons? Would you believe that? Who would be dumb enough to believe these types of stories about all this legend and lore around Silicon Valley? I know it's hard for many people to understand how this could possibly be true. Why would a story like this be fake? Who gains from it? It's complicated and beyond the scope of this particular section. It's just how the world works. However, if you take a close look, a lot of these legendary Silicon Valley stories make no sense. In the movie The Social Network, we're asked to believe a penniless Sean Parker just weaseled his way into Facebook to gain a 10% controlling interest that led him to billions. But monster companies like IBM or Cisco System and Oracle and Sun Microsystems and all the ones that existed, Yahoo, they just had no interest in controlling the future of the internet. The huge companies of Silicon Valley, like I said, like Oracle, they just sat back and did nothing, while Zuckerberg's team programmed around their Silicon Valley pool, taking in a homeless Sean Parker, as we see in the movie. If something was so popular that it crashed the Harvard computer network, don't you think these billion-dollar companies that already existed would have known about it? And don't you think they might have tried to get involved? Now, we know this is what Silicon Valley companies do because you hear stories of Silicon Valley companies in the late 90s investing in hundreds of startups, hundreds, hoping just one makes it big. For example, I think there was a company called 3Com, was big at the time, invested in hundreds of companies. Only one made it big. The company, it was called Palm or Palm Pilot. They became bigger than 3Com, but they only have to win on one horse. This is what they do. But they just left old Zuckerberg alone. You know, all the schools and Stanford was using the Facebook, and why would anybody from Silicon Valley show up and offer Zuckerberg, maybe as he's sitting around the pool, here's a check for $100 million, son, turn over everything to us and go away? The whole story is much more complicated. Does it ultimately tie into how the NSA and the CIA use Facebook to spy on everyone? Of course it does. The fairy tales presented in The Social Network are that, in my opinion, fairy tales. However, I mean, these people do exist. There is evidence that Mark Zuckerberg, Eduardo Saveron, and these people did develop these things. Okay? They're not just face people, in my opinion. However, I don't believe once they started to get traction, they were completely unnoticed by both the government and Silicon Valley. Okay? So I think Don Corleone interest took over a lot sooner than what we're told. Now, if you really want to laugh, let's go on to the Elon Musk story, or the anagram is lone scum. That's even more ridiculous. We're told Elon Musk was enrolled in the aerospace engineering program at Stanford University for 3 days before he left to help start PayPal. Then, after he sold his stake in PayPal, he used his entire net worth, a paltry $300 million, to replace NASA and at the same exact time create the world's leading electric car company? What? When he went to go get funding for SpaceX and he made his pitch to get, say, $100 billion in investments, what did he say when they asked about his experience in space? Did he say, "I, Elon Musk, have 3 days studying at Stanford"? Did the investors reply back? Well, it was 3 days in the PhD program, so I guess it's okay. Where should I wire my millions to you? The story is actually true. Musk dropped out of the aerospace engineering program at Stanford after 3 days to go over to PayPal. Now, most of these stories, in my opinion, are fairy tales. They go on and on and on. Much more of these stories exist than what I'm going to cover here. For example, have you heard about the Xerox story and how Xerox, the copier company, invented the WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get, the WYSIWYG mouse, to control the on-screen arrow. They then invited industry leaders like Steve Jobs to come see what they invented. The story is, Jobs then rushed home and began work that very day to steal the concept. That's the official story. In about a year then, he brought the Apple Macintosh to market with a mouse and an on-screen clickable icons, while I guess the people at Xerox were just jerking themselves off. Xerox maybe didn't think to get a patent on any of that. They couldn't afford a law firm as the largest copier company in the world to sue Stephen Jobs out of existence. Now, I don't know exactly what's going on, but none of these stories, in my opinion, hold water. Every story also centers around a kid who quit college. It's amazing. Not one of these billionaires ever graduated. The same thing with Michael Dell. HP came out of a garage. The stories go on and on and on. The universities must be very proud, because to make real money, you need to quit them. I mean, but the Jobs story, just going off book here, this Jobs story with Xerox always it never sat right with me. There's whole documentaries about it. The Net 2.0 and that PBS documentaries where Xerox invited everybody in. Look what we did. Look what we invented. And then Jobs just sat there, took notes, and just said, I'm going to steal it. And he actually, the story says, he went back to his programmers, and one guy was working on a computer and was just finishing coding. He'd been coding all day. And Steve Jobs was going to change the entire direction of the company towards on-screen clickable icons and a mouse that controls an arrow, where the Apple II was just the old-fashioned computer. It wasn't that way. And the guy wouldn't listen to Jobs, so Jobs went this is the story. Jobs went under the table and yanked out the cord. And the guy lost everything he was working on, or whatever wasn't backed up. And he said, you're not listening to me. We're changing the entire direction of the company. So when Jobs and all these people were first of all, why would Xerox even invite them in to look at all of this stuff? And if they did, they would have had to sign disclaimers. And the disclaimer would have basically said, we're going to show you this stuff, and if you develop any of it, by signing here, you acknowledge we easily can sue you out of existence. But no, come on in. Look what we did. And Jobs, just go steal it and go take what could have been a global market share for Xerox. Come on. What are the chances that almost every major city in the world has a giant statue of an Egyptian-style obelisk, which from legend represents the penis of the Egyptian god Osiris? From the really big penis of the Washington Monument to the smaller, but still impressive penis of the obelisk in St. Peter's Square, to the regular penises in the city of London and all around the world, these obelisks are popping up everywhere. What the heck is going on with all these obelisks? This could be another 2-hour section. We're just going to end it there. We're just going to notice the strange anomaly and move on. How is it possible the insane housing crisis that appeared in California from 1998 to 2002, during the dot-com boom and all the startups of these Silicon Valley companies? I was actually out there in the middle of it. I used to work for the insurance company Cigna. They sent me out there from 96. I quit my job in 2002 to come back to PA. But the thing is, how is it possible it's repeating itself all over again? But it's far worse. In 2019, a small 1-story, 3-bedroom home on a tiny little plot about 1/8 of an acre in Silicon Valley is selling for about $1.4 million. Teachers, once again, are leaving work to go sleep in their cars. It's the same story all over again. A man in Sunnyvale had rented a tent in his backyard for $45 a night. A tent! And people are glad to pay it. Now, into the tent, he was a nice guy. He did run an extension cord. that was plugged in. So you could plug into the extension cord that came in under the tent. And he did allow the occupant of the tent to go inside the house to take one shower a day. Of course, the garden hose was always accessible if you needed another shower. Now, he was eventually shut down by the city, because you can't just decide to become a little hotel. But before that, he had to turn other tent renters away. Other tent renters were saying, can I get in on this? And for $45 a day? Do the math on $45 a day. It's quite expensive for a tent. Now, all this is happening all over again. They'll run it up again, and at some point, they'll crash it down. Maybe they haven't crashed it down so they can steal everybody's real assets. Maybe they figure if crashing it down again really could send a shock that could severely damage the world economy. And maybe they're just not ready for their one global currency yet. But it'll happen. What are the chances that the 1898 novella Wreck of the Titan, also called Futility, written by Morgan Robertson, portrays an incredible coincidence to the actual Titanic story that would happen about 14 years later? To start with the name itself, Wreck of the Titan, Titanic. Both ships were described as the world's largest. Both were described as unsinkable. Both hit an iceberg and went down in mid-April. Both were under-equipped with lifeboats. Robertson describes his fictitious ship, the Titan, as almost the same size as Titanic, with it being only 25 meters longer. Now, this is significant because very few people in the 1800s could have predicted anything close to Titanic's massive size. He wrote about it in a fiction novel, but nobody would have ever thought that could be real. Just another parallel. Titanic was remarkably big, of course, even 14 years later. Henry Ford's Model T came out in 1908, introducing the modern age of industrialization, which could not have been comprehended when the Wreck of the Titan was written. What are the chances a 1949 book from Wernher von Braun, the Nazi founder of NASA, is called Project Mars, a technical tale about colonizing Mars, telling the story of an advanced civilization living on Mars with their leader being named Elon. Elon Musk, the same as the head of SpaceX, who's given over 100 lectures about what needs to be done to colonize Mars. So, back to the fraud, Wernher von Braun tells us about Elon, the leader of the civilization on Mars, and now the guy pushing for the Mars missions, his name's Elon. Reality script. What are the chances that on the Pope's last day visiting the United States in 2016, his procession would roll right past the gates of hell? You see, the Rodin Museum, the thinker, it's on Ben Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia. And the thinker, most people don't realize this, is part of a larger Rodin sculpture called the Gates of Hell. So this Gates of Hell surrounding this doorway has all these figures depicted, all these things going on in the sculpture. And one little figure in this Gates of Hell is the tiny little thinker. And I guess that was just so popular that then Rodin started to make a large thinker. He brought that out of the Gates of Hell. There's probably symbolism in that. It's now hitting me as I'm talking about it. He brought the thinking man out of the Gates of Hell, and then that statue actually became more popular. That's not even the point here. Point is, here comes the Pope's procession rolling to get to the Art Museum in Philadelphia. The last gala or speech the Pope would give, the last celebration of the Pope, I think, was up under the Art Museum, the Rocky Steps. That's the Rocky Steps in Philadelphia. But his procession rolls right by the Gates of Hell and the Rodin Museum on the Ben Franklin Parkway. What are the chances that the FBI website for murders lists 0 for 2012 for Newtown, Connecticut? The FBI official website lists 0 murders. Now, how is that possible? And just going away from the book, guys, a personal story was presenting certain elements of that fraud to family members and brought that up, and they went, no, that can't be true. I'm going to look that up. Somebody whips out, I've probably told this story, but it's just fascinating. They pulled out their little pad, and they said, yeah, it does say 0 murders under the FBI website. But there must be a reason. There must be a reason for it. What you're telling me, Matt, about what did or didn't happen, that can't be true. So, of course, as the internet is set up to bait and trap everybody looking for the answer that they want to find via Snopes and Metabunk and even mainstream sources, like they know exactly what you're going to search for, and the internet is constructed so people find what they want to see. So very, very quickly it was, oh, here it is, Matt, here it is. It says here that the reason it may say 0 for murders, or I forget what he found or where he found it, but sometimes statistics are not reported to the feds properly from local police and from state police. And I'm like, what? Well, if the whole point of FBI crime statistics is to get it right, if certain local jurisdictions weren't reporting in properly, it would have been fixed 40 or 50 years ago. That the person wouldn't listen to the common sense that I was presenting. And of course, if I would have said, well, they have to show you, they have to hide the truth in plain sight, or they would have really accepted that. They it was they just didn't report. Yeah, the biggest the biggest event of all time, and the local police and the state police of Connecticut didn't report the numbers to the FBI. And the FBI wouldn't just fine with leaving the big 0 on their official website. If anything was real, folks, even if that was true, somebody at the FBI would have noticed, we have 0 here for Newtown. Let's fix this right away. That's if anything was real. It's not. Oh, look, I don't know what it says today. I'm going to put an extra line in the book here. Maybe today it is reflected properly, but I'm telling you, this book is also a documentation of history. A documentation of history that basically doesn't exist anymore. I'm telling you, for at least, it's probably that way today, but at least 5 or 6 years minimum, it said 0 murders for that town and that zip code at whatever it is, FBI.gov. It probably still says 0 today, but I don't care what it says today. This was still, it wasn't like they corrected it in a few weeks. It was at least years. And again, I haven't looked for years, so who knows what it says today, who cares? How is it possible those that we call the puppet masters of this world all live well into their 90s and surpass mortality tables by 20 to 30 years? Queen Elizabeth, 92. Prince Philip, her husband, 97. George H.W. Bush, when he died, 94. Barbara Bush died at 92. Henry Kissinger, 95. David Rockefeller, 101. Jacob Rothschild, I have 82. I thought he was older, but George Soros, 88. Warren Buffett, 87. Pope Benedict, 91. Kirk Douglas, 98. Madonna, 86, etc., etc. It's all a coincidence, I guess. All of these people, and Queen Elizabeth takes the cake. I mean, there's nobody that you could ever talk to that you could say, do you ever remember anybody else but Queen Elizabeth? I'll go, no, maybe it's always been Queen Elizabeth for thousands of years. I mean, of course not, but I don't know. I don't, I'm in my 40s, and I'm not sure. I mean, Queen Elizabeth, she might outlast me. She never goes anywhere. It's just mind-boggling. But of course, these folks, I'm sure they get the same medicine that we all do, and they get the same vaccines that we all do, and the same cancer treatments that we all do. Sure. How is it possible a remake of the movie The Matrix or the trilogy was never made, or a part 4 or prequel or anything? Movie studios just don't like guaranteed profit? Or perhaps Hollywood has an honor code to never come whack on an old school track. No, they never repeat the same themes over and over again, do they? In an era where we see a lack of new ideas and creativity in Hollywood, recycling the same dumb-ass superhero movies 50 times in a row, they won't make another Matrix movie, which would give Warner Brothers or Village Roadshow Pictures about a $200 million guaranteed profit. The movie wouldn't even have to have the aging Keanu Reeves in it, just as hopefully Miss Congeniality 6 can do without Sandra Bullock. Leave her out in space with George Clooney, and let Keanu go make another bad John Twitt movie. If they put out any sort of Matrix movie, even if done poorly, it's a $200 million guaranteed profit. No doubt about it. Star Wars Solo was the younger years of Han Solo without Harrison Ford. It mostly sucked, and it featured a Lando that made love to robots, but still it made them a ton of money. You could make a Matrix movie about a young, gay Morpheus in his first year as captain operating the Nebuchadnezzar. We find out that he originally wanted to name the ship Moby's Dick, but Niobe wouldn't stand for that. Even that turd of a movie would clean up at Fandango. But there's a reason they never made another Matrix movie. Let's get serious. There's a reason. It likely reveals too much truth, in my opinion. It's generated critical thinking in millions of people, and I don't think it anticipated that. Or the karma issue, they had to show us a bit of the truth. Do I believe we're really in pods? No, I don't believe we're really in pods, but there's still, in my opinion, and my buddy Greg agrees, that there is tremendous, tremendous truth in the Matrix if you look at it in a certain way. What are the chances that every single act of the Obama life play is some sort of strange cartoon-like script? Now guys, I'll pause for a moment. There's 2 more segments left. This Obama segment is a little long. I think it's fascinating, but if you want to skip it, or time is of the essence, the last segment is on the strange anomaly about The Price is Right, pushing 60 years, The Wheel of Fortune, 36 years with the same hosts, 3 sixes. I mean, there's 2 left, so maybe you want to skip to the game show one, which is last. This one will be about 5 minutes, but the Obama cartoon character is fascinating to me. The whole story is bizarre, but it was crafted to be that way. It starts before the Golden Child's birth, as this strange revolutionary type from Kenya, Barack Obama Sr., comes to the United States to study at the University of Hawaii. A few years later, he and Stanley Dunham, her name is Stanley Ann Dunham, they get married and have a little savior baby, Barack Jr. Then Barack Sr. divorces Ann, and he goes off to study at Harvard because those slots are so readily available to Kenyans who have studied for a few semesters at the University of Hawaii. By the way, what Harvard probably thinks of the University of Hawaii? Think of the worst community college in your backyard, and that's pretty much what Harvard thinks of the University of Hawaii. It's all a script, the Obama Saga. Now, then Barack Sr. only sees the Golden Child one more time before his death, and he flies back to the U.S. from Kenya to make that visit. Conveniently, though, pictures are snapped of the 2 of them together, so later President-to-be Obama can have a birth certificate controversy. Again, all part of the script. Then we have young Barack dragged off to the largest Muslim country on earth, Indonesia, where Stanley marries an Indonesian, Lolo Sotoro. Somehow a nobody like Lolo has the pull with insiders in Indonesia to get little Barack enrolled in a Jakarta school that years before was reserved for Dutch diplomats and Indonesian nobility. So I don't know what Barack is at this point. He's dragged off to Indonesia. I don't know. Maybe he's 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. But coincidentally, they get him in the best school in the country called CAS. I guess any old map maker in Jakarta like Lolo, who has adopted a little black kid, can get their bastard son such a hard-to-come-by admission. Sure. We were originally told Obama was just going to school in any old Jakarta public school with the rest of the Indonesian poor. That's what we were originally told. One wonders how Obama could have made it to Harvard after having failed all his classes in Indonesia. Well, how could he have passed one single class, not speaking a word of Indonesian? Anybody ever consider that? Well, of course. Again, it's a special school. These elite schools teach in English. Lolo could not have afforded a school like that. Obama, with a few others, were handpicked almost at birth to play these types of roles in scripts. Then Obama, the teenager, pops up in Hawaii, where his now father figure is Frank Marshall Davis, the most well-known communist in the state. Well, that shit happens all the time to normal people. I was raised by my state's most prominent communist for a few years too, weren't you? Frank Marshall Davis then proceeds to take, and get this, publish nude photos of Obama's mother, Stanley Ann. Then there's the strange and creepy history of Obama at both Occidental College and Harvard, where there's no real history of any friends and little account of him even going to class. Kind of like Adam Lanza of Captain Hook. Somehow, Obama ends up in Chicago after all this schooling, and he marries a woman he later refers to twice as Michael. Has any man, think about it, has any man out there listening to my voice ever forgotten his wife's name, let alone made the mistake of substituting a man's name for his wife's? How many times has Jen's husband called her Ben? Several years of community agitation then goes by, and Obama's using his law degree to cause trouble with community agitation. Then that makes Obama the perfect puppet for the bankrupt Illinois State House, where, of course, he easily wins. Right now in the story, we're approaching Obama's greatest moment, the famous reading from a teleprompter during the Democrat National Convention of 2004, which, of course, everyone thought was just so wonderful. The speech he was asked to read was so strong, and he read the words off the screen so well, the entire news media the next day was saying, that guy could be president of the United States one day. It was all over the news for days. And if you're, again, this is tough to put all the historical pieces together if you're under age 40. Remember it like it's yesterday. Yeah, I remember hearing it from myself all over the news that guy that just read off the teleprompter could be president. And I just sort of shook my head up and down like the other zombies. I was a zombie just like everybody else then. I didn't critically examine that. I thought that makes perfect sense. A guy can give a single speech and then he can be considered for president. I was just shaking my head like all the rest of Pavlov's dogs. Back then I believed everything on CNN was absolutely real. If you stop to think about these circumstances, though, it's comical. People were buzzing about a man who could be president because that man read words from a teleprompter written by somebody else. Wow, how massively impressive that is. The reading of scrolling words. Can a man be declared the next Babe Ruth in baseball by taking pitches from a machine in a batting cage? Nobody said a thing about Obama's accomplishments because he had none. I'm not kidding. When Obama gave that speech, he had nothing on his resume that, quote, a real president, if politics were real, would need to qualify as a candidate. It's like a mule putting in for the Kentucky Derby. What was on his resume at the time, Obama's, where people were buzzing about this man that could become president? Let's take a look at it right now. Organized South Chicago residents to burn down Sal's famous pizza with the help of Radio Raheem and Mookie. That isn't good enough for a president's CV. After about 45 minutes of reading from the teleprompter, in less than 1 year then, of course, Obama catapults from Illinois state senator to U.S. senator from Illinois, where he's caught sitting in pews listening to Reverend Wright, Damn America. In the middle of his first term as senator, Obama then quits, and of course, why wouldn't he? Runs for president. Obama's accomplishments in the U.S. Senate, spending less than one term there? You guessed it, 0. I think somebody authored a bill and they put Obama's name attached to it so he could say he authored a bill. He did nothing. This is all a script from birth, in my opinion. He almost set a record for missing votes. Again, Obama's lifelong accomplishments at this point, 0. I mean, you probably would have to go back to that school in Indonesia to find, maybe in the school in Indonesia, maybe they had a day where, like in any elementary school, they glue cotton balls onto pieces of paper, cardboard paper. He probably did that. That might be an accomplishment. I don't know. Then in the middle of a national terrorism scare, the country has no problem voting for a man that actually contains the name of America's biggest enemy, Hussein, and whose last name is one letter off of America's second biggest enemy, Osama. The words of Obama's pastor hating America is also of no consequence to voters. Look, if this isn't a simulated realm then, as in everything else, Obama's life is a script of some sort. He was groomed to be president from birth. There was no election the way you understand it. And, everybody knows who. Barack Hussein Obama, which is one letter off from Barack Saddam Hussein Osama. I've slipped many times and called him Osama. This is how the demented reality script works. If anything was real, there would have been hundreds of thousands of people that went, I'm not voting for a guy whose name is Hussein and that's supposed to be America's number one enemy. Most people are that fickle. Most people are that fickle. It's just the Obama story, if done in the right way, like a documentary, is just mind-bogglingly stupid. Okay, let's close this section of horrors with a bit of fun. It's perhaps the biggest reality breakdown of all. How can The Price is Right be on TV for over 60 years? To me, that pushes a century. The second host, Bob Barker, molested those three models that presented the prices between 1972 and 2007. 35 years Barker was there. The damn show is still on. What's that guy's name? Drew Carey or something? The Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy have been on air for over 40 years each. All three current hosts, Alex Trebek, Pat Sajak, and Vanna White, all started in 1983 and are on their 35th year, rapidly approaching 36 each, the three sixes. I'm only half joking about this one. If anything in this world is real, how is this possible? Stop and think about this very carefully. Over 500 million people worldwide, 500 million, were born and died on this earth knowing nothing other than those three shows having the same host and being on air with the same hosts their entire lives. Hundreds of millions lived and died knowing nothing other than Vanna White turning letters at 7:30 Eastern. The shows were on as millions looked out from the crib. Who is the designer Gucci? Correct, for 200. The same show was on for the same millions then as they left the crib, got older, and graduated elementary school. Who is Boy George? Correct, for 100. The same show was on as those millions started their first day of work. Who is Tony Blair? The same show was on as millions died in their hospital rooms from injury, disease, etc., 10 to 15 years later. The last thing they heard in their life mirrored the first thing they ever heard on television. What is Gucci Gang? Remember the first question? Who is the designer Gucci? This, quite plainly, is a surreal reality breakdown. If The Price is Right passes a century, 100 years on air, will that get anyone's attention that something strange is going on? Now, I don't have all the answers, and no one at this point wants 30 more pages of speculation about Wheel of Fortune and its occult reason for being. But I'm confident these shows are on air as long as they are for reasons related to the nature of reality itself, or the way the script delivers reality onto all of us. It's some form of lesser magic. I don't have a full understanding of it, but I can sniff it. No, it's not that an old matronly type Vanna White turning letters is the very best money maker in that time slot, and 36 years in a row nobody can make any more money than Wheel of Fortune at the 7:30 time slot. It's just about making money. Now, most people around us will never be able to see that Wheel of Fortune's ability to make money is not the point. Money doesn't mean shit to the people that live in the penthouse of the pyramid. Assuming it was about money, and money was the motivation, let's just say. Think about it. Pat and Vanna's salary alone would dictate that the show would be less profitable than some sort of reality TV that you could put in that time slot. It costs nothing. One that doesn't have actors or hosts. You think Vanna makes $200,000 a year? She is so essential to that show. She probably makes at least $10 million a year. And somebody right now is looking it up. I don't care what the TMZ website says. How do you know what she makes? You believe everything the TMZ website's going to tell you? I mean, if it is a form of lesser magic, then Vanna could be worth $100 million a year. I mean, you need Vanna and Pat for that show, okay? Where I guess you didn't need Bob Barker. Look, the creepy Vanna doesn't even turn letters anymore. She just touches boxes that light up, and it makes a letter appear. Look, there's something really strange going on with Jeopardy. Also, I'm just going off the book here, guys, to sum this up. The way it's phrased, you have to say, who is David Rockefeller? You can't just say, David Rockefeller. Nope, they'll say you're wrong. They won't give you any credit. You have to phrase it in the form of a question. We all know that. Why does it have to be phrased that way? I mean, what's the point of that in the game show? It's some form of lesser magic. It's kind of an ode to themselves. That language itself is spellcraft. Wheel of Fortune. It's all occult, esoteric. And these are the reason these shows go on and on and on. And if The Price is Right pushes over 100 years, I would think that would get somebody's attention. But considering the dumbed down state of everybody around us, probably not. Okay, guys, that's the end of this section of the book and the chapter. But one more important thing. I don't want to say I'm recommending the link below, but I'm asking you to listen to it. I can't recommend it because I don't really know who this person is. This person seems legitimate, but we must always wear our skeptic's hat. This rebuttal or addendum to my video is almost brilliant. So I want you to listen to it. And I told him I'd be very clear with you as to the disclaimer or the warning here. Hopefully this is somebody really smart that we have on our side in the truth community regarding this link that I'm leaving in the description. But do I wear the skeptic hat when somebody comes out of the blue and delivers a flawless presentation and expands on my own theories that I've been working on for years and years and years? Yes, please listen until this person completely proves who they are and working for us. We will be skeptical. If the attach was from Greg or somebody I know, then there would be no reason for this disclaimer. But it's too brilliant not to ask you to listen. Just listen and view it in the right frame of mind. I can't recommend it at this time. This person has no history with us.